Welcome back to the Sunny Stampin' Studio. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this cute top note treat topper. Why don't we get started? First thing you're going to need is a piece of scrap paper and a piece of Whisper White cardstock. It's about a quarter sheet, so 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. You're going to need some real red craft ink, and I'm using this stamp from the I Heart Heart stamp set. Now, my ink pad is a little bit goopy because I just finished inking it up with my re-inker. So normally it's not going to look quite, the color's not going to be quite as intense. So what you want to do is you want to ink up your stamp, and you just want to randomly stamp it all over the front of your Whisper White cardstock. And as you can see, I'm angling my stamp as I go, trying to fill in as many of the white spaces as possible. Now don't worry too much about ink smears like that. I actually accidentally dipped my finger in some of that red ink and got a smear on there. But we're going to be die cutting this, so it doesn't matter too much. You're just going to have to be aware though, as you are working, that you are going to have wet ink here, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned to grab a scrap piece of paper. So once you've stamped your pattern like that, you can go ahead and get rid of your scrap piece of paper so you don't accidentally smear your work. Now what you're going to do is to grab some iridescent ice embossing powder, and I like to keep mine in a container. I find there's less wastage that way and it's less messy. And I'm going to sprinkle this all over my stamped heart, or my stamped images. Now normally when embossing, I would run my embossing buddy over my cardstock first to help prevent embossing powder sticking where you don't want it to. But in this case, I don't mind if there's a few extra flecks around the images because I find that it just adds to the effect. So once you have your cardstock all stamped, you want to, or all covered in iridescent ice, you want to very carefully hold it and flick off any excess powder so that it looks like this. Now, as you can maybe see when you're looking at this, there's a few little extra flecks of ink around. That's what happens when your ink pad is a little bit too goopy. As your ink pad's drier, you're not going to get that kind of effect. So I kind of like how it looks. So now I'm going to take my heat tool, and I want to hold my heat tool a couple inches away from the surface of my paper, and I just want to heat this until the embossing powder melts. So I'm going to zoom in so that you can see it. I'll show you a few seconds of the embossing, and then we'll flip over the next section. It's a little bit more challenging to tell when iridescent ice embossing powder melts, but you'll notice that it's all done once your images become a little bit darker. So when the iridescent ice powder was unmelted, it looked a little bit more opaque. So I'm now going to go ahead and zoom out. So the next thing we need to do is to die cut this in the shape of a top note die. And I'm going to create the following sandwich. I'm going to have one of my cutting pads, my top note die. I'm going to place my cardstock upside down, and I just want to make sure where I have the smudged corner that it's not on the die. And then I'm going to cover it with my second cutting plate, and I'm going to take this and run this through my Big Shot. Once you've die cut your top note shape, we now need to fold it in half. Now, just to make sure that I get this somewhat straight, I'm going to align my ruler with the 2 points, and then I'm just very carefully going to shape it around the ruler. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and fold along that line using my bone folder, like so. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and we're now going to create the greeting. So I need a piece of Whisper White cardstock. I'm going to ink up my Love You Much stamp. This is from my well-scripted stamp set, and I've stamped it in basic black classic ink. I'm going to punch this out using my 1¾ inch circle punch, and then I'm going to sponge the edges with a wedge of stamping sponge and my Real Red Classic ink. thing I want to do is grab a couple of buttons from the playground collection. And I want to thread these buttons using a sliver of cardstock. So I'm just going to zoom in here for a second so you can see what I've done. I've cut a sliver of cardstock, which I fed down through the top of the button. And then what you do is you open up the cardstock little tails on the back. You stick this to a mini glue dot, and then you fold the tails on top of the mini glue dot so they're going to stick to the dot, and then just trim the ends. Now once you've done that, you can go ahead and pick up the mini glue dot, and I'm picking it up near the top of this because it's going to overhang my Love You Much a little bit. And I want to do the same with my small button. And I'm just going to go ahead and zoom out so you can better see what I'm doing. And I'm going to stick that right beside it like so. Now I've already gone ahead and die cut a circle. This is out, or a scallop circle. This is out of Stampin' Up's pennant die. And I want to attach my Love You Much greeting to the scallop circle using Stampin' Dimensionals. So I'm putting 3 dimensionals in the back, and then I'm going to go right ahead and remove the backing. And I'm going to center and stick this onto my scalloped circle. I can now go ahead and stick my Big Shot top note die to my treat bag. This is a small cello bag that I've already filled with hearts. I've folded the top down, stapled it, and added some sticky strip to the back of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the red backing off of the sticky strip. I'm going to lay this inside my top note. Now before I actually stick the back down, I just want to see how far down I want the top note to go. So I'm holding on to it. I haven't let it stick down yet. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I let go and let it stick. So that's now what it looks like. I'm now going to take my real red satin ribbon, and I'm going to take about a 16-inch piece. I probably don't actually need that much, but I tend to like to have a little bit more ribbon than necessary so that it makes it a lot easier to tie. And I'm just going to go ahead and tie it in a knot right close to the edge of my top note die. And this is what's actually holding it closed. So there you go. You can now go ahead and trim the ends of the ribbon on an angle. And I'm just going to save these extra pieces. I can use them for another project. So actually I would say when you're doing this, you could probably safely use 14 inches of ribbon instead of the 16. So I'm now going to place some Stampin' Dimensionals at the bottom and of my scalloped piece, and I'm also going to place some directly onto the top of my top note up here because I want my scalloped circle to overlap the top of my top note die. So then you just stick that down like so. And you're done. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to stamping with you again.